A bird sang this song to me. There was a message in its melody, sweetest lyrics that I ever heard. There's a message in the songs of birds. He said, tomorrow is another day, but living is the only way that tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be.
Greetings. Welcome to the Sip of Inspiration television show. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman. I am your host for today's show. For those of you who have been following this show lately, we've been doing a series about the African American struggle for equality. Today's show is part 3. Last show dealt with actual finances and medicine. And if you watch that show, I have to warn you in advance, you will be shocked about the discrimination that even occurs in the medical field, whether you had great insurance or no insurance. So you need to watch that series. But today we're going to talk about the criminal justice system and how it affects African Americans and how that leads to from a modern day version of slavery with the mass incarceration of people who look like me and brown people in general in today's criminal justice system. Anthony Lowry is going to join me today as my guest, and as you know, I love having him on because he has such great news to share often about the reforms that are occurring right now in the criminal justice system. And without people like Anthony and the work that he does, sometimes I wonder, where would our hope or chances be? We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. I want to give you an opportunity to get paper and pencil because we always share a lot of information, and Anthony has lots of resources, and we want to be sure that you have the information you need. So we'll be right back.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Mom, I got it. What are you doing in there?
I got stuff.
Are you a dog?
I wouldn't do that. Have you seen the pliers? Where'd you find those?
It's not your birthday.
Sorry.
Bye, Grandpa.
Bye, Grandpa.
Take care of yourself.
What are you doing? What are you looking for?
Thank you for calling your GED Pep Talk Center. All right, now, are you ready for your GED Pep Talk?
Being nervous is okay. It just shows that you're serious about getting your diploma.
A lot of things are scary. Heck, I'm scared of clowns.
No quiero oír. No lo puedo hacer.
DMC, life in your pep talk style.
Just keeping it real, Debs. Just keeping it real. Whatever motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Get your GED Pep Talk and find free classes at yourged.org.
Welcome back to A Sip of Inspiration. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, your host for today's show. So joining me, as I mentioned earlier, is Anthony Lowry, who's the Vice President of the Safer Foundation. And he has years and years of experience of dealing with the incarcerated, not only while incarcerated, but on their journey back into society. And some of us think that everyone in prison should be in prison, but I want you to listen to this. Published late in 2017 or early in 2018, the Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Statistics found that the majority of most violent crimes are committed by people who are the same race as their victims. Indeed, the rate of white-on-white violent crime is found to be 4 times the rate on black-on-white crime. So the idea that the only crime is black-on-black crime is a fallacy. There is a lot of white-on-white crime, and the statistics show that the percentages are just as high in either category. So the whole idea that only brown people, people of color, are committing these kinds of crimes is not true. And as watching Brian Stevenson's program on HBO, he says that that's the narrative that they're telling that's keeping us locked into this systematic system where they're still managing to get free labor. I often say that the biggest problem we have in society is that white supremacists haven't gotten over the fact that they can't get free labor. So, and as we go through, we see there are just statistics on top of statistics on top of statistics that crime is going down at a tremendous rate in America. But that's not the narrative we hear on the news. And now that we know that all races and ethnic groups are committing crimes, the news isn't talking about that. They're only talking about the narrative of the crime in the minority communities. That's all you hear. You don't hear anything good. And according to this, we're killing each other at a high rate that it leaves you to wonder how we're even graduating, because the narrative really is not in the real world, is not a narrative of crime. We have successes like you wouldn't believe, but they're not published anywhere. So I have Anthony here because he can help me talk about the effect of this narrative and how it actually shows up in the community. I always say you cannot outperform the level of your conversations. And as long as we've been given that conversation, that is what we're going to do. Thank you for joining me. So I know you got great things to share with us as always.
No, thank you, Stephanie. And really always an honor to be here. And I have to commend you for keeping this conversation in the public eye, because it's a critical conversation. It impacts the majority of black people. Everybody you probably know has some relative at some point who is incarcerated or has been incarcerated. So this is tremendous information and a tremendous forum to provide information to people who've been impacted. As far as looking in your framing is tremendous of the issue, and throwing in the racial equation in the issue. And I always talk about the racial equation when I'm going into prisons, when I'm going into schools, to try and get people to understand the backstory of incarceration. 2019 is the 400th year of slavery in America. Slaves came to America in 1619. 2019, 400 years later, we're still enslaved in the criminal justice system. Racism is American as apple pie. Racism is etched in the DNA of every American institution and is fulfilled through our criminal justice system. And we were talking earlier about the disproportionate rate of incarceration with blacks and whites. And statistically here in Cook County, African Americans are 8 times more likely to have police contact, to be arrested, to be convicted than whites for the same crime. So when you look at the figures and when you look at the disproportionate minority contact, you see why our prisons, our jails are filled with people who look like me. And every prison I go to, state, federal, Cook County jail, 60 to 80% of all occupants are people of color. So when you look at the situation of incarceration and you look at the impacts in our communities, is the new Jim Crow, is the new slavery. And again, it continues to roll out, negatively impacting our people and keeping us thrust in poverty.
I know a lot of us have are of the opinion or belief that everyone in prison has been convicted of a crime. But I've discovered through some organizations like the Bail Project that that's not the case.
Yeah.
That a lot of them have not had a trial date yet.
No. You have Cook County Jail is a detention center where people can be held there for years awaiting trial. Their only crime is that, okay, they've been accused of a crime, but they're poor and they can't pay bonds, so they stay languishing in jail. Cook County President Tony Preckwinkle has done an outstanding job with Judge Evans to remove that bond barrier, to reduce the jail population, because again, the Cook County President always says that Cook County Jail is the axis of poverty and racism in this county, and they've done an outstanding job of reducing that population. If you have a nonviolent crime and you cannot afford to pay bond, then they will put you out probably on an electronic monitor, but again, you will have the opportunity to come home, keep employment, still be there for family, still hopefully work if you have a job. So it's critically important because again, when you have people who are not convicted of anything, but they're still impacted by the same issues that a person who's been incarcerated for 3 or 4 years.
Right. They lose their jobs if they can't get out. They, not only that, they can't pay their bills, so they lose their cars. So they lose the transportation. The credit rating is ruined, and if they had a job where you had to have a good credit, they don't have a job anymore there. And they did nothing except be accused of committing a crime. They have not been, they're not guilty yet or innocent. They're just waiting for their day in court. And for those of you who think that the day in court comes quickly, it often is years.
You have continuances, you have continuances, you have continuances. They have a public defender. Public defender's usual caseload is probably between 100 and 150 people. So again, you do not get the legal support that you need to prove your innocence. If you're an African-American male, you're guilty until proven innocent. So again, when you're looking at the situation, when you're in the justice system, the chances are for you to go free are very low because you don't have the legal representation and you don't have the support you need to move forward and come up out of that system.
Now, also, so there are a couple of programs on HBO too that talk about the bail projects and the lack of the ability for people to get bail. I mean, and some of these bail amounts are small, like a couple of $100, and people just don't have that. So we're not looking, so sometimes in our mind, the narrative that I see on television is when they talk about the crime, every time they talk about crime, you see some image of some black male doing something wrong. I think they've been, and the other day I saw that, and I says, by God, this is the same image they showed on when Nixon was running. They don't even have new images, but we have become so used to television and what we hear on the radio being the facts, and then we regurgitate that information among ourselves. And when someone is arrested, we say, oh God, they did something. But I think it was Johnny Cochran that says is that you can guarantee you will never commit a crime, but you can never guarantee that you will not be arrested for one.
If you are an African-American man, again, you're 8 times more likely to be arrested than a white person. And when you look at, there are a lot of bail reform issues that are going on because we see that was a tremendous issue as far as people with less than $500 bails cannot get out of jail. So the bail issue has been a critical issue that we try and address. But again, when you look at the totality of the impact of the criminal justice system on African-American communities is devastating and is generational. And this is not anything that just happened today. I remember, again, looking at the news stories, and the picture of success for people with criminal records you don't see. I'm a person with a criminal record. I'm a national advocate. I've testified in Washington, D.C., done a whole lot of things over the years. But the image of a person with a criminal record is not me. Is the mugshot we're going to see on the news tonight.
Right.
So when you look at that mugshot, it permeates fear in the communities. When I'm walking through the streets downtown and I'm walking past Caucasian women or Caucasian men, I see the twinge, I see the fear, because again, in their eyes, I'm a criminal. I could have a PhD, but when they see the skin color, I'm a criminal. So that's the perception of the African American, especially the male in the United States of America. And you can take this back to slavery, to where African American men have never had the protection of the federal government. And I was looking at the Black Panther story a while ago when they killed Fred Hampton here in Chicago. and just the heinous nature where in 1969, J. Edgar Hoover and Richard Nixon stated that the biggest threat to the American way of life, and this was in the Cold War, was not China, was not Russia, was not Cuba, it was the Black Panther Party. So how dare the black man stand up and talk about equality and rights? And they went on a campaign to kill, run out of the country every black leader that they could. And again, looking at the Fred Hampton situation, and they have a wonderful mural right there on Madison in California of Chairman Fred. And they came in 4 a.m, shot in the bedroom 33 times. And the state's attorney, who was Hanrahan at the time, had the audacity to run for re-election. So again, when you look at the heinous treatment that we get, especially in the criminal justice system, because again, I could have been arrested, never convicted of anything, but when I go look for that job, they do a background check. There is the arrest.
Right.
So again, the further discrimination, the collateral consequences that we talk about are lifelong and everlasting. So again, it's critically important that we have forums like today, that your show to really educate people on the issues associated with the arrests, with the reentry, and also how to get relief from the criminal record.
And I found some other interesting statistics about crime in the U.S. This was for 2018. So that I said, well, what is the crime? Since we're so afraid of all the things that African American men are doing to us, what's happening? And the statistics even show that violent crimes are down, robbery is down, aggravated assault, property crime, burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, and arsons are all down. Rape, however, is on the rise, okay? So the crime overall is not as fearful as the news makes it out to be. So we're spending all of our time looking and taking in these stories that are not true. We don't ask them about the quality of their data. You know, so they are able to get away with it. So we as a group of people, first off, need to start asking them about the quality of their data, and we need to start demanding better stories in that news. We need to call up those the owners of those news stations and say, you know what, we need better news. We just need to. I want some stories that show the true face of the African American man and African American women.
And again, I think we have the power to do that. We have to make sure that those stories are being told. I think we have a great opportunity at Safer Foundation, where I am Associate Vice President of Community Housing Programs, because we have board members. Bob Jordan has been a board member for years with our organization. So we have a venue where we can highlight that success, where we could talk about the process, where we can move forward and kind of bring a public education venue for the issues associated with what we're trying to do. But when you look at the criminal justice system and you look at the financial impacts of the criminal justice system, there are 1.3 million jobs in the criminal justice system in America. Locking up black folk pays. So when you look at the situation, that profit motive, and then you look at the private prisons, where you look at, I know President Obama ended the contracts for private prisons when he left office, but then our new president immediately reinstated the private prison contracts, because again, you have people who are untrained, who are uneducated, who don't have the skill, and they're mostly locking up black folk. They look at it as a job. So again, and with data, I always talk about data, because with things, even with the University of Chicago Crime Lab, every data point is associated with a human life.
Yes.
So again, what we see in this system, and we've seen that historically, is that they take out the humanity. They're not seeing me as a human being. They're seeing me as that statistical number. They're not seeing the impacts on my family and my children. They're just seeing me as that data point. And I think when the people who police our communities are not seeing the humanity in the people that they police, we have a problem. When you look at how can you shoot somebody 16 times and they have a switchblade knife and they're walking the other way. So again, I'm not even seeing this person as a human being. So that's a bigger issue. If I don't see you as a human being, whatever happens, the viciousness, the heinousness, any way I can treat you, because again, what I see you is a savage and a person who does not deserve respect. So that's the big backdrop as far as the application and the implementation of the laws. But again, what we try and do is get people out of those situations, because again, that's why I go into the prisons. And I try and go in there to just have real talk with guys. Not to sugarcoat anything, but again, okay, you're here. What are you going to do coming out the door? If you want to stay free, these are some things you have to do. You have to come out and get connected with a program on the first day. But again, you have to understand the easiest case to prove is the person who's on parole. So I try and have that talk, and I give everybody my cell number so they can call me as soon as they get out. If you want to do the right thing, call. If you don't, keep it moving. But again, the impact that I see, the impact that I've seen in my family, I got 3 generations of incarceration in my family. My father was in prison. I've been locked up. 2 brothers, nephew locked up now. That's 3 generations of black men in one family. And that's a typical story in our communities. And so again, once we try and create opportunities through economic development, through real hope of opportunity in our communities, we can kind of diminish those numbers and reinstall some hope in our communities, because now what we see is young men are basically hopeless that there is an opportunity. They don't understand that education is a pathway to success because what they're seeing, what's going on in our communities.
Right. Yeah. Well, with that, we're going to take a break, and when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about how where we are, the link between where we are and actually slavery. Okay? And even go back one further than that, if we're even so bold, is a genocide of the Native American Indian. Yeah. So it started way back then, and it's continued to this point. So I want you guys to stay still. We will be right back, so don't go anywhere.
Hey, can you chop the pineapple? Chop the pineapple.
Nope, I'm high. How about I wash off the grapes?
Yes.
Okay.
You're already making good decisions when you're high.
I want tacos. Will you drive? I'm a little toasty.
Nope, I'm high. Let's order in.
Don't make an exception when it comes to driving. If you feel different, you drive different.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Oh, those boys are much too much. Those boys are much too much. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We're going to beat them and bust them.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Let's get a little bit rowdy. R-O-W-D-Y.
Take time to be a dad today. Call or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Dummy, you're pathetic.
You little brat.
Child abuse is also known by some other words.
Jerk. You moron. You're so clumsy.
Words like these can hit as hard as a fist.
You were never born. I hate you.
What you say to your children can determine how they feel about
You
themselves
slob. You're worthless.
and how they feel about you. Get the picture. Stop using words that hurt. Start using words that help. For helpful information, contact us.
Attention travelers, next Tuesday, a major power outage will cause complete chaos throughout the city. Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Disasters don't plan ahead. You can. Talk to your loved ones about how you're going to be ready in an emergency.
Welcome back to A Sip of Inspiration. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, known as the Empowerment Doctor, and I'm your host for today's show, which is the third part of the African American struggle for equality. And we're talking about the criminal justice system and how it affects minorities. So on break, we had a really interesting conversation. Laquan McDonald in Chicago was shot 16 times as he was walking away with this knife in his hand. And for those of you who don't know, most people say we had a knife. Well, he was carrying a blade that is of legal length to carry in Illinois. So it's a blade that we all have, small, it was less than 3 inches. And we didn't see, the humanity wasn't seen, nor was a taser used. Gunshots were used, and then there were a lot of opportunities for people to stop it, and no one stopped it. And then, as you said, The Black Klansman. I don't know, The Black Klansman was a great movie that was out that really shedded some light on this, how the Klans were told to go to mainstream, to become mainstream. So they're politicians, they're policemen, they're judges, they did all of that so that they could carry their agenda, which is, I would have said, I was almost about to say hidden, but it's not hidden anymore. It's an open agenda, and that is to be sure that minorities are enslaved in some form or fashion.
And I think the tragedy, what we look at, I did a forum at UIC last year regarding the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Commission report. The Kerner Commission was established by President Johnson in 1967 after the riots in Newark, Detroit, Watts, to try and find out what were the issues, why was there so much unrest and violence in urban communities. And when the results came back, they did not want to release the report because what the report said is that the primary issue of unrest and injustice in America is white racism. And then looking 50 years today is the same issue, the alt-right white racism. And then when you have the drum major of racism at 1600 Pennsylvania, is a green light to do anything you want to, where they make speeches to the police, do anything you want to them. So when you look at the issue of racism in America, and that's the backdrop of everything we're talking about today, because again, the Emancipation Proclamation, 1865, it took black folk in Texas 2 years to realize that they were free. After the Emancipation Proclamation, then you had the cattle slavery, you had the vagrancy, you had any issue where they can lock up the black man and get free labor.
Not saying sir to white men,
yeah.
Being on the sidewalk when they same sidewalk, yeah. Or looking them in the face, yeah. Or accidentally smiling, or even speaking to a white woman. Yeah. If you guys don't realize, some of those things were crimes for African Americans, but they weren't for whites, because they could do whatever they wanted to do to African American women.
They could send you to prison. And again, in the new Jim Crow, I think Michelle Alexander does a great job in chronicling this history from slavery to Jim Crow, to the prison industrial complex being the new Jim Crow. And again, my nephew is in prison, and he works an industry job, and he's making clothes for Illinois Department of Corrections. And I think at the end of the month, he might get $60.
Right.
So again, I'm making uniforms, saving money for Illinois Department of Corrections, but I get $60 a month, slave wages.
Right.
So we've talked about at a federal level to try and get a minimum wage in prisons when you're learning skills, when you work in industry jobs. But again, that's been met with ferocious opposition, because how dare you say that people who are locked up deserve the same thing with education, the fight for the Pell Grant. Recidivism is less than 5% for people who have college degrees. But again, they do not want to utilize Pell Grants to give people an education while they're incarcerated. So again, primary reason for all of this is skin color. Skin color is the biggest qualifier and disqualifier in this country. So when you look at the criminal justice system and you look at the opportunities for coming back home, and the tragedy of it is that the system not only impacts the person who's locked up, but it impacts the children. It impacts the spouses, but it impacts the grandparents. Everybody who cares about that person is impacted, because again, the financial contributions that have to be made, the phone calls, the video conference calls. But when we look at incarceration, and again, I always go back to the financial motive, because with the phone calls, we finally got some legislation passed this year to bring down the cost of those phone calls. Because again, the phone calls, the communication, anything that you need to support that person to hopefully that person comes out and can be successful is a financial burden on people. We talk about second chances, but most people who are locked up never had a first chance. Because again, when you look at the history, the generational impact of incarceration and racism, there were very few choices. I grew up on the west side of Chicago. I live in the Inglewood community today, and I see the impact of mass incarceration, men snatched out of the household. I see the impacts of allowing young men to be on corners selling drugs, and the school kids coming home from school see that as a picture of success. We talked about what success looks like in the black community. We don't see that highlighted, but we see the negativity. We see the mugshot. So again, with the demise of African-American communication outlets, Ebony Jet, and things of that nature, now our success is not highlighted the way we used to. Because again, I grew up as a kid in the 70s. College was the natural next step. Right. I graduated from college, and even having a criminal record, most of my friends graduated from college. Today I go into high schools, and young people do not have that dream. They do not understand that opportunity. So again, here in the city of Chicago, we've had meetings with the new administration. We've asked for an office of reentry in the city of Chicago that's totally focused on providing opportunities with economic development. We work closely with the governor's office on the new marijuana legislation, where money is pulled out of there to provide the financial opportunities and economic development. They did not even want people with criminal records to be part of the industry. You cannot work in a store, you cannot work in a field, you cannot work in a truck driver. We were able to push that back to allow people to eligible for their occupational licenses, they can work in that industry. How do you bring a multi-billion-dollar industry into the state and we can't get a dime? The same thing with healthcare. When I went to Washington about 2015, and I was staggered by a statistic regarding healthcare employment, that it was 20 million jobs in America. That just totally shocked me. I had never even seen that. So I remember getting a call from one of our colleagues at Cabrini Green Legal Aid about a lady who had a 30-year-old misdemeanor conviction and couldn't get a job as a CNA. I'm like, come on, 30-year-old misdemeanor. Years? You can't even empty a bedpan. So when I went to Washington, D.C., Congressman Davis invited me to come and testify. And I testified and I challenged the congressmen to go back to their communities and start up conversations with hospitals. They have the majority of the jobs here in Chicago. They're adjacent to communities that are in poverty. As a result of that, we were able to bring in Johns Hopkins to Chicago, leading hospital in the country for the last 22 years. Had the first healthcare forum in the city, specifically for hiring people with criminal records. As a result of that, we've been able to get over 150 people hired into hospitals, with the hospital knowing they had a criminal record on the front end. Career pathway jobs with advancement, opportunities. We had our annual fundraiser last year, and the chairman of the board of President's Hospital introduced our success story. This is a young man who came in, who already received promotions, who already worked hard. Given the chance, we can accomplish outstanding things. And I think they know that. That's why they eliminate the chance. So again, what we have seen, I remember being in Washington at the Legislative Black Caucus one year, and Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., before his illness and before he left Congress, gave a brilliant testimonial regarding states' rights, how African Americans need equal protection under the law. When we look at the criminal justice system and we look at the different laws in Missouri, in Alabama, in the different states, in Indiana, I can get arrested and it's a crime. In Illinois, I'm not. So with equal protection under the law, the rules are fair and we understand what the rules are. But when you look at today and to parallel the abortion debate,
right,
where now you have the states lined up taking away rights, and the same thing in the criminal justice system. So again, when we look at the impact, when we look at people of color really being terrorized, enslaved, because the bottom line of all of this is that they do not see the humanity. If I'm a black man and I have success, I'm still in an opportunity from a white person. So again, that's the thought. I'm not deserving of anything. So when you're in these towns, when you're in these other states, and every day we see unarmed black man shot by the police.
Every day.
Every day, body cam.
Not tased,
right.
Shot, but they can tase the white man.
Yeah.
But they can't figure out how to tase the brother.
Body cam conveniently cut off.
Right.
So again, when we see these things, and that's why it is critically important for us to watch these shows that provide information, that give a forum. But again, we have to participate. The power of voting is the free power that we have to change. We see in Chicago where we had Mayor Lightford just won election where nobody even thought that she had a chance because the power of people who've had enough. We have to make sure, and I think coming into 2020, we have to make sure that people are registered. The last election in Georgia, they eliminated 70,000 people off the polls. We have to make sure that people are registered so we can turn this around, get people in positions that look like us, who care and understand us.
And a lot of people believe that, well, it doesn't matter if I vote because they'll just mess with the numbers. But let me tell you, I'm a math buff. Let me tell you about numbers. If we vote in record numbers, it is impossible to mess with the numbers because everyone will know. It's only when there's really low voter turnout that you can massage the numbers and make them tell the story you want to tell. So just know, in high numbers, nobody can mess with those numbers, okay? Because everyone will know that they've been messed with. So vote for every election. William Barber says this, and so does Cheryl Eiffel. Every election, know who you're voting for. Because if you stop that racism at the local level, they never rise to where they're in Congress because you stopped it. So read about the people's voting records, read about their hobbies and where they spend their time. It's all available online, and know if they support what you believe is important. And if they don't, say no. And I believe that sometimes, and if you don't know the person on the ballot, vote no. Don't give them a chicken yes, just vote no. They need to prove themselves, because if they were doing good work, you would know about them. That's right. Another thing is that Brian Stevenson and even Michelle Alexanders talk about this pipeline and talk about the narrative. And I don't think people understand how that narrative works. I don't think they understand that the more you see and listen and agree to the story, the more it affects you. And you have to remember, my grandfather used to say, the best way to tell a lie is it's got to have some truth and the rest lie. So you have to watch for that. And I don't think people understand that's what happened back then, and it's still happening now.
And I think, and I try and break it down, Stephanie, to where they want to lock your babies up, okay? They want to lock your children up. They want to steal their dreams and hopes. Everything they do is to destroy, humiliate, disillusion, make you think there is no hope, so you won't participate in the process. So again, when you look at the pipeline, and there was a lot of talk at third grade reading scores, they can see, identify young people who would probably wind up in prison. And again, I remember being in elementary school, and my teacher, who was a white lady, would tell people with behavior problems, you're gonna wind up in jail. So again, what they are seeing really is putting the information in your head, putting the information, still in the hope, still in the opportunity. So the pipeline is real, because again, we've done a great job here in Illinois to try and eliminate juvenile justice. We've diminished that population. But again, you got to give young people hope with education and support. Because when I go in these communities, and when I go into households and see the lack of support, the lack of education, the lack of opportunity, is horrendous. We look at the 7 communities that feed prisons in Illinois, and it's the same communities that we see on the news every night.
Right.
You know, the same communities that people return to that don't have any support, the underperforming schools. And one of the biggest tragedies I saw in my community of Inglewood, where they closed 4 high schools to build a new STEM academy. When they closed Robeson, Harper, Hope, and Inglewood Charter, there were a total of 300 students combined in 4 high schools, grades 9 through 12. I had never heard of anything like that in my life. 4 high schools that were built to hold at least 1,500 students. You had a total of 300 students, 9 through 12. Right. So again, when through the media, through the music, through everything they discourage us, they still hope. We don't even line up for what has been a proven pathway of success. So that's the biggest challenge that we have. And again, I was a foster parent for like 10 years, and I only took African-American teenage boys. And one young man came into our home, he was 15 years old, and he said that penitentiary is the black man's destiny. And I was, wait a minute, hold on, what are you talking about? But everything he's seen in his life has been every adult male in his family has wound up in a penitentiary, because that's the way the system is designed. We have to support, we have to highlight success, but we have to understand what our opportunities. At Safer Foundation, we have tremendous programs. We have a construction company where we can train you to be a construction worker. We have a worker electrician. We have healthcare opportunities and trainings. We have logistics, transportation. We have the industries that have the greatest need, because again, once we see like healthcare, 20 million jobs, there's opportunity there. If we get in on the front end, we will have an opportunity to work. If we don't, then they will discriminate against us. So again, the biggest thing what I always tell families is that you have to show a level of tough love, but show support. If the person wants to do the right thing, then support them. Guide them to other programs, guide them to Safer Foundation. Our number where you can always get services is 312-922-2200. All you have to tell them is that I got a criminal record and I need a job. So again, what we have to do is get our men especially engaged so we can show our young people, this is the way that you do things. What we're doing now is the exact opposite, because when we have 11-year-olds, 14-year-olds who are really out here shooting, where was the breakdown in that family? So again, we have to, as a community, come together, recognize that there are racist things in play. There are racist policies. Another thing that we did was, I think, really tremendous this year is we just got a Cook County housing ordinance passed.
Oh, right.
And what that does is prevent landlords from discriminating because of the criminal record. So again, we have people who've been working, but if they try and go into private housing, landlord does a background check, the record could be 20 years old, and they'll still be discriminated against. Now it's against the law in Cook County to discriminate because a person has a criminal record. So,
we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about, what parents can start to do when the kids are young, because that's where we have to get it. I mean, we do have to do some intervention on our teenagers. We have to do intervention on our preteens. But there are things that parents can do, and I don't want them to feel like it's just totally hopeless, because we still, as long as we have breath, and as long as there is a divine power, which I believe there always is, there is a way. So we'll be right back.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan, big fan. Thank you. And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you. Oh, man. Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
How do you really help people successfully reintegrate back into normal society? Which means that you've got to have resources, you've got to have programs, you've got to have people who understand what the problems are, And then you've got to try and convince communities to open up and accept these individuals as a part of normal life.
Just to have an opportunity for the Safer Foundation to hire people that's been in prison, because the organization is basically to help people in prison. So to do that was a great opportunity for me.
To come to Safer and to get the counseling that I did allowed me to show my son a different side of me. I'm grateful to Safer to help steer me into the right direction.
This is Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, the Empowerment Doctor, and welcome back to a Sip of Inspiration. Anthony Lowry is my special guest for today, and I always love it when he's on the show because we get so much information. And if you're like me, you're sitting there wondering, why isn't this what we hear when we turn on the news or running through Facebook? Why is this? Why am I getting shared videos of people who are fighting and acting ugly instead of sharing this stuff? And this is the stuff that we need to share. So I promised you when we came back, we were going to talk about some techniques and some things that we can start to do as parents right now with our children, no matter where we found ourselves. And on break, we were talking a little bit about just that whole narrative that we carry with us, where we were told that we wasn't going to be nothing, wasn't going to do nothing, wasn't going to amount to nothing because you was nothing, right? We've got to break that. We've got to decide that that's not going to run the show of our life anymore. And I know that sounds tough because you think about it all the time, but when that comes up, you've got to decide, you got to say to yourself, no, that's not who I am anymore, because I have some support out here. You may not be able to find it readily because the game or the narrative is that we keep believing that we're worthless and useless and only deserve the crumbs at the table. But that is so much further from the truth. We deserve far more than that.
And it's critically important, Stephanie, and again, I go back to when I was a foster parent. And I remember bringing a young man into my home. I had 2 young men who were actually born in prison. And I remember talking to my father, and I was saying, Pops, they don't do, he said, nobody ever taught them anything. This is the reason nobody ever taught them anything. So the thing that we gave them was, for the first time, somebody said, I love you. We had a young man who had been in 20 placements. So 20 doors had been shut on him, and people were telling him, no, we don't want to deal with you. And so I just encourage all parents, be part of your children's life. Tell them that you love them. Get them involved in extracurricular activities. Chicago Police Department has at Hamilton Park, has a Little League baseball team at no cost. Everything is free, gloves, uniforms, everything. Look for those opportunities to keep your children engaged in opportunities. They're free musical programs.
Yes.
They're free other programs. Highlight, support, love your kids to keep them away from the negative activities. And again, there may be some situations where you may need to talk to someone or you may need support. Don't be afraid to ask for support. Don't be afraid to understand what's going on so you can make better decisions in your life. As a community, we have to come together for our children. In each individual home, we have to recognize that the greatest responsibility in life is the responsibility of a parent. You are shaping and guiding a young person's life. Make sure that you are present and you are involved in that young person's life. I remember going up to schools and hearing parents calling the teachers MFs and Bs, and I'm like, come on. And then they were shocked when the child, a couple of weeks later, called the teacher a MF and a B.
Right.
So again, we mirror the behavior that we want our children to have. Again, if we can keep them on the positive pathway with extracurricular activities, I guarantee you they would not go to jail. They would not be impacted by this criminal justice system that will put a red tag on them for the rest of their lives. So again, what we want to do is just make sure you're present, make sure you understand what the issues are so that you can support your children so we can break this cycle of poverty and incarceration that's totally dismantling our communities. 2 important things that I want to touch on, Stephanie, is that Yesterday at our office, we were able to take about 20 people to private attorneys to get their records sealed. In 2017, we passed a new state law that opened up the sealing process for people with criminal records. If you know anybody who has a conviction, they can now probably get their records sealed. Give us a call, 312-922-2200. Let them know I want to get my records sealed. All those calls come to me. I'll talk to you, guide you through the process where you get free legal help. Another piece is the Cook County Public Defender has a new program where you can have a lawyer at the point of arrest. The biggest impact, negative impact on people with records is at the point of arrest, where they will charge you with 27 felonies and you don't even know your rights.
That's right.
All you have to do now, there's signage up in the police station where you can call and have a lawyer at the police station at the point of arrest. So
and another point on the point of arrest, too, is I don't care what they tell you. They make up all kind of stories and lies, and police are legally allowed to lie to you, okay? All you're supposed to say is, I want an attorney.
Yeah.
That's all you say. I don't care what they ask you. Don't say yes, don't say no, because the minute they ask you something and you say yes or no, they've got you psychologically hooked. You want an attorney first.
Yeah.
And now in Cook County, there's a mechanism in which you can have an attorney present, because they charge you with everything. And then they offer you, if you plead guilty, take a plea. 98% of everyone in prison is there by virtue of a plea bargain. Don't plead. Get an attorney, because you're due one.
Yeah, and at the point of arrest is the greatest point of impact because people don't know the information. So again, if you need help with anything regarding the criminal record, please just give us a call, 312-922-2200. I'll be there to help you, guide you through this process, make sure your rights are protected.
That's right. And for mothers and fathers, there's been a lot of studies about the success of our children based upon how much we read to them. Yeah. You know, you may not have a physical book in your house, because I know some people don't, but everyone has a smartphone or some tablet or something. Yeah. Find stories to read to your children and to discuss those stories, because the more words they hear, the better they will perform in school. And it helps jumpstart the brain. And if you read the stories that, there's stories out there about everything, about love and what love is and how to love and animals and all of that. Read those stories and you'll get your children and possibly you interested in more than what you see on the newsreel 24/7. Because we're more than that, and we have many more opportunities than that. So I want you to really write down the number, though, to the Safer Foundation, because the Safer Foundation has a lot of programs, and we could only, because we only have a limited amount of time here, we didn't talk about all of them. So the number of the Safer Foundation is 312-922-2200. And it's saferfoundation.org. So it's SAFER, safer, then foundation.org. And call, and if you have a loved one that's about to be released, call. Because there's things that you can do prior to the release that will help the reentry. Like, what documents are they going to need for identification? Because that caseworker that's in that prison, they're not that concerned about that at all. So there are things that you can do that can help them in their transition. Safer Foundation can help them. There's jobs, there's education, there's a lot more that they need that we don't know, because even though the Safer Foundation is doing great work, you don't hear about that in the normal course of your day. So be sure you make a contact there. So any last words?
Well, the biggest thing is just provide support for people with records. But let's break this generational cycle.
Yes.
Be the example that you want your children to be. Go to school. Be part of PTA. When people who are impacted come home, support them. Make sure they get engaged in programming from day one. A lot of people now are coming back with the electronic monitor on. Usually the only way they can get movement is to be part of a program.
Right.
So again, let them be engaged, involved, support them if they're doing the right thing, but be able to give them tough love if they're not. I just thank my mom for giving me the tough love that was necessary, and my sister for turning my life around. It is possible, but again, you have to be focused. You have to make a commitment just to keep it simple, do the right thing.
Right. So I want to thank you all for listening to the show. And we did do something a little different, so we're streaming live on Facebook. So I know that if you have questions and stuff, the iPad is like way over there, so I can't see the questions, but I will respond to the questions, and if there's any other questions feel free to ask questions on that Facebook live video, and I can be sure that Anthony can get those questions, and we can get you where you need to be so that you can have some closure. We did not have an opportunity to have the expungement summit on the show this year. We usually do, but what we'll do is follow it, because Tony brought up the fact that they had some pre-registration this time. So go out and watch the internet, because it's always posted on the internet, and be sure you're pre-registered, because if you're pre-registered, then you can be seen that day and have the problem solved, or at least know what your next steps are. Sometimes we don't even know, and this is even for juveniles, because I don't think that people with juvenile records believe that they can participate too.
Yeah, the record doesn't automatically go away. A lot of juveniles think it goes away. Now there are some mechanisms for legislation that will help them, but they need to make sure that there isn't a record, because a lot of colleges will see the criminal record.
Right, so you can make that go away, and you want that to go away. So in the meantime, I want you to be sure that you know that you are worth fighting for, that you have what it takes to do whatever it needs to be done, and that sometimes the road looks a little roughy, but that's just how the road looks, okay? But we can make that rough journey together. So I want you to find a hill worth taking and take it. Do not go gently into the good night. I want you to know that you are the person that you have been waiting for. And above all things, make today so great that tomorrow gets jealous. So that's my timer that says we're done and up. So I'm going to turn it off so that it doesn't interfere. Thank you for joining me. And I tell you, I'm going to make it a point to do a show like this regularly so that we know what we can do. You guys have a great day. It's been a blast, and it's been my pleasure. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, the Empowerment Doctor, and this has been a Sip of Inspiration.
Life's too short to drink cheap champagne, so I decided to buy me